Welcome! Today we're diving into a massive paradigm shift. We're going to unpack some classic research that completely flips the script on what we think we know about addiction, compulsion, and just human behavior in general. If you're the kind of person who loves having your basic assumptions challenged, well, you are absolutely in the right place.
So, what truly causes addiction? Take a quick second to really think about your answer, because for decades, society has handed us a very specific story about how chemical dependency works, right? We've been taught that the substance itself is the sole driver, that the hooks are literally all chemical. But what if the science we built all that on was missing? Honestly, the most important variable of the entire equation. Just keep that in the back of your mind as we get into this.
Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1. The old theory of addiction.
All right, so here is the classic experiment that basically shaped our entire modern approach to drug policy. Scientists put a rat in a cage and gave it two very distinct choices. On the left, a bottle with just pure, normal water, and on the right, a bottle containing water laced with either heroin or cocaine. It was a stark, totally binary choice.
And well, the results were pretty grim and seemed totally inevitable. Step 1, you isolate the rat in an empty cage. Step 2, the rat almost always goes for the drugged water. And Step 3, the rat compulsively consumes the drugs and ends up killing itself, usually within just a couple of weeks. For a really long time, the scientific community pointed straight at this and said, look, there you go, that's our theory of addiction. The idea was that the chemical is just so irresistibly addictive that it inevitably leads to death.
But then comes part 2, Welcome to Rat Park, and honestly, this is a massive plot twist. You see, science is all about asking better questions. And in the 1970s, a researcher named Bruce Alexander did exactly that. He looked at that old setup and realized there was a glaring flaw. He basically said, hang on a minute here. We're putting the rat in an empty cage. The poor rat had absolutely nothing else to do. The isolation, that utter emptiness, it wasn't just a backdrop. It was actually a critical variable.
So Bruce decided to build what became known as Rat Park. And guys, it was frankly heaven for rats. Everything your average rat about town could possibly dream of was right there. We're talking lovely food, sex, loads of other rats to hang out with, and colored balls for them to play with. It was this rich, highly stimulating, socially fulfilling environment, just a vibrant, massive contrast to that bleak, solitary cage.
Now, inside Rat Park, they gave these rats the exact same two choices, normal water and the drugged water. But here is the absolutely fascinating, breathtaking thing that happened. They didn't like the drugged water. They hardly used any of it. In fact, none of them ever overdosed. When they were surrounded by friends and living a good life, the drugs simply lost their appeal. Now, what's really interesting about this is that it forces us to adopt a radical new definition. Addiction is largely an adaptation to your environment. It completely shatters the whole myth that compulsion happens in a vacuum, driven entirely by chemical hooks. Think about it. If it was purely chemical, the rats in Rat Park would have still overdosed, right? But they didn't. The compulsion wasn't about the drug itself. It was the response to the pain of the empty cage.
Which brings us to Part 3. The human cage. Let's turn the lens onto ourselves for a minute.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core issue we are facing today. On the left, you've got that empty, isolated rat cage. On the right, you have the environment we've actually built for modern humanity, a hyper-consumerist, hyper-individualist, highly isolated world. For a lot of people out there, the society we've created fundamentally feels a lot more like that first deadly cage than it does like the connected, vibrant environment of Rat Park.
The tragedy of this modern cage is really profound. We've somehow engineered a society where significant numbers of our fellow citizens simply cannot bear to be present in their own lives without being drugged. Just like that isolated rat who turned to the laced water just to cope with the sheer emptiness of its environment, humans are reacting to a society that has slowly but surely stripped away our natural social fabric.
So, how do we get out of this? Part 4, Rethinking the Antidote. To actually fix this problem, we have to consciously shift our environment. We need to move away from this isolated world and start building bonded, connected cages. Because humans, just exactly like those rats, are deeply social creatures by design. We require community, we need meaning, and we crave interaction just to thrive. When we are bonded and truly connected, the need to adapt through addiction diminishes drastically.
All of this leaves us with a profound, almost mic-drop realization. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. This entirely reframes how we should view recovery, how we structure our communities, and what we fundamentally need as human beings to live healthy, fulfilling lives. So take a hard look at the cage we live in today and ask yourself, How are you building connection?